son, where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast, and we're back again for an episode of firsts. This is my first episode ever where I have COVID at the same time. So that's a fun little first. The second first is we're debuting, or I guess exclusively broadcasting a very intriguing, mysterious transmission. And to help us get to that point, we've got yet another very intriguing guest. Somebody who is a master of visual effects, a filmmaker, a creative powerhouse, Daniele Auber. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is an honor to be here. Thanks a lot.
So just kind of a brief bit of a backstory. I met you actually through James, who we just had on the show, and you guys, I guess, had met at some point as your paths crossed working in the film industry. But can you just kind of, for my audience, give a quick, brief background of what your career is like, and then we'll go all the way back to well before the career and talk about how you get into the creative arts and the way that you're involved now.
Yes, thank you. So I work as a concept designer only for the film industry, show business. Sometimes I work on commercials, but it's mainly movies. And how I got here was starting in art school. I'm from Italy originally. And so that's where I've learned my skills from my father, that was an artist as well. And but I really wanted to make movies. I wanted to make special effects and animatronics and prosthetic makeup and all of that kind of practical effects that we used to have before computers. And so that happened. I was very young when I started working in movies, making some great horror and sci-fi and fantasy in Italy with directors like Dario Argento. And then soon after, in the mid-90s, I moved to London, changed my life, and I worked in a Jim Henson's Creature Shop over there, where, great things were happening. Like,
yeah, sure. It's legendary stuff.
Harry Potter, and with them, with that team, I won an Emmy Award that then helped me move into Los Angeles, where I am now in California. I've been here for 20 years, making great movies with great directors. The most important for me have been definitely Terry Gilliam. I've been working on many films with him, and there was a great influence in my professional evolution, but also Wes Craven, the Wachowskis, Luc Besson. I've been super lucky to work with wonderful, wonderful people. So what I do, I imagine stuff. I design, starting from the script, visualizing creatures, worlds, whatever it is, sequences. I draw sequences. My latest movie it's called Damsel. It's a dragon movie for Netflix with Millie Bobby Brown, and that was pretty cool. So this is what I do, really. It starts from drawing, painting, sculpting, and then I became a digital designer in the early 2000s with Terry Gilliam's movie Brothers Grimm. That was my transition from practical animatronics and stuff to just designing creatures and concepts. So this is more or less the short version.
Well, and we'll definitely get into more detail. I definitely want to talk about Dario Argento, and I mean, just so people can kind of get an idea, I'm going to pull up your IMDb. Big stuff. Yeah, Cloud wonderful. Atlas that's one of the. I did not know you when I found out about Cloud Atlas, and that movie melted my brain. This is big stuff. This is like some of the most intense scale of stuff. It was kind of funny having James on here too, and just kind of having his, prosaic explanations of working on the Avengers and stuff like that. But this is quite a reputation, quite a list of credits here. And I guess the first question I have for you is like, of the things that you have done, what to you is like the best representation of your art or your creative design? Or
So what turns me on the most is the creative process, right? Working next to a director is the most beautiful thing that can happen, because you really participate to inventing something together, inventing something that hopefully doesn't look like anything we've seen before. We always try to do that and rarely succeed. And an interesting aspect of your question is that often the most fun you have can happen not with the best movies. Often with the most trashy films, with the ugliest. Probably the most fun I had was in some really B horror movies that I've done in my youth, right? It's so rock and roll. Zombies and killings and blood splattering and stuff like that. That's really part of my best memories. But then going on another level, if I have to find a compromise between a film that I really like as a spectator, and also a film that was really meaningful for me as an experience, was probably the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus by Terry Gilliam, which was an important movie and a very, very difficult movie, because in the middle of that filming, in the middle of that process, we have lost a dear friend and a great actor, which was Heath Ledger. And so it's a film that brought a lot of suffering and a lot of beauty at the same time. And the way Terry Gilliam managed to turn things around and managed to rewrite the film when we were in the middle of shooting and finishing it without the main actor was a miracle. And what was this incredible nightmare, which was, if we look at Day for Night, the Francois Truffaut's film from the 70s, that was explaining to us, like, the worst thing that can happen to a director is when your lead actor dies. There's nothing worse. And Terry managed to keep the film alive, keep everything together, rewrite, and the result is phenomenal. I love that movie so much. It's poetic, it's phantasmagoric, and it's so meaningful. Yeah.
It's so funny too, because I remember when Fouché and I were still in Nebraska, his mom was part of the Academy, so she got this movie, and I remember watching it, and both he and I, and even Sandy, his mom, was like, this is one of the most intense movies I've ever seen. And that, those were big words coming from Sandy or James, because they've literally seen every movie. And I imagine that does make sense, in the sense that the movies that are a little more independent, that are a little more, that there's less money in, less big names associated, you can kind of have a little more freedom to be lawless with what you're doing. But as you get into the bigger productions, you're allowed to do things that you could never do on a smaller budget, or working completely independently, Yes,
you're allowed to do them from an aesthetic point of view, but from a more deep, from a more profound point of view, it's difficult when you have a lot of money, because the director, the author, has less decision power, and there's more. The decisions are more coming from the producers, who can be great people. The producers can be great filmmakers, but more and more they're just accountants who want to make a lot of money, and they're not really familiar with the creative process. So yes, to have a lot of money is good for the manufacturing the product, but it's a bit of a danger to, if your goal is to make a movie that's original, special, and innovative in terms of script and choices.
Yeah, no, I mean that definitely makes sense. And I think we should definitely get into how do you, because your art style isn't, it's particularly ethereal. Your art style is what I imagine the art of dreams is like. Of everything that I've seen of your work, it's different than just somebody designing or doing special effects for a movie. It's an exceptional level of imagination beyond that. And obviously your experiences add up to making you see the world that way and interpret things through your brain and spit them out that way. But what I guess, going back to the very beginnings before you even really doubled down on going into film, what are the things that inspired you to art? What are the movies or albums or things that inspired you to think as abstractly as your art is?
The influences are many, right? And style is something that you don't really decide or choose or try to create. The style comes from it. If you have a style, you don't know you have it. You don't try to make anything specific. You just do things as well as you can.
Yeah.
And then the other people will recognize a recurrent, elements on what you do. So we just try to do things as well as we can. And obviously our influences, the things we like are definitely. So as a child, we are talking about, I was a teenager in the 80s. So the movies from the mid-late 70s to the early 80s were what I was really dreaming about when I was, and it was related to often animatronics and special effects of that kind. And most of those beautiful creatures in that period were created by Carlo Rambaldi, which was this Italian special effects maker who came to Hollywood to work with Spielberg, and he created, for example, the aliens from Close Encounters and King Kong from 1976, which was a milestone in my formation because I remember my brother. Well, I was maybe 6 years old, and my brother, which is 4 years older, told me, they made a movie in America, and there's an ape, there's a gorilla, which is 12 meters tall, and it's a robot. He told me it's a robot, and this thing just blew my mind. I couldn't believe someone created a gorilla robot that would be that tall. So this man was Carlo Rambaldi, who was creating these magical things. So those were my influences. And then obviously what happens in your personal life is also very important. When I was a child with big imagination, and this thing was triggered especially in a specific summer and when I was 11 years old. I don't know what happened in my brain development, but it was like for the first time I discovered nature and the stars. Suddenly I saw them, I saw nature. It was really like a spiritual crisis, expansion of consciousness.
Sure.
As we have our normal life, we have our normal interests. In that summer, something expanded, and I was perceiving the beauty of nature. There was that summer we went for a holiday in the mountains, in the Alps, and that was the vibe. That was very influential for me. Also because, funny enough, these are those kind of things that you keep for yourself. And I kept it for myself for the longest time. But with my family, we saw something that we can call a UFO, UAP. And it was incredibly mysterious and it was just incredible. We couldn't explain what it was. It didn't feel like anything artificial or natural. Therefore, there's no explanation. But in my 11-year-old mind, I thought we saw a UFO, we saw the aliens, right? And so I think that event that showed me something that was completely different for what I would learn from school and TV. That thing kind of set my imagination to a different level than it was before. And so it was easier for me to play with my imagination even more. But then it's one thing to be imaginative and then to be able to be concrete enough to then bring that imagination into reality and make it real, right? Materializing that. So that's the next step that comes with skills and practice. And so then later, when I was a teenager, I was a loner. I didn't have many friends because I was strange, I suppose. And so I would spend a long time in my room drawing monsters, reading Fangoria. And those years were particularly formative for me. I think they forged me as being able to materialize my imagination. That's I suppose what forged me. Yeah.
I mean that definitely makes sense. You know, it took me a little bit longer, probably into my 20s, before I really understood the power of buckling down, taking the idea in my head and doing the work to get it out of my head in the most, accurate way. But yeah, it's kind of a gift and a curse. Yeah, you're a loner, but that whole time you're working on art.
Yes.
And you probably were a loner because the way that you were viewing the world was just so abstract to the folks around you that they couldn't relate to it. It's kind of a gift and a curse situation.
Yeah.
The only way you get to have skills like that as early in your life as you do is committing, sacrificing, playing outside, hanging out with friends, and working on art.
Yes, it's an impulse. It's yes, it is discipline. You spend hours and hours, but it's also a pleasure. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it, right?
Sure.
Or maybe what they call sublimation, right? I think it was Freud who came up with this. You just channel that energy that you have, especially as a teenager, into something that's creative, and that's it's building a discipline, following an impulse, and also you have the pleasure of doing something that looks super cool to you, and then you show it to your friends, those few that you can trust, that won't laugh at you, and that builds some kind of reward.
Sure.
And that's how then it can become your job, right?
Well, it's interesting too, because it's like many people have ideas. Very few people have the mental fortitude to take that idea out of their brain and turn it into something tangible. And I think it's interesting that, especially within movies, it's like you subtly influence people's visions of things, because some people can't conceptualize stuff like that. I've been bringing this up a bunch, but there was like this recent study that was something like 50% of people don't have an internal dialogue. Like they don't speak with themselves in their brain. They don't work problems out like that in their brain. And they rely on people who can take abstract ideas and turn them into something tangible. And it's just interesting with regards to movies or music or a few of the other performative arts, how that ends up like shaping humanity. Like you were even talking about the guy who made the aliens for
Close Encounters.
Close Encounters, right? That affected how the world envisioned in their mind what is an alien, what would it look like. Many people don't think about that, but the movie, especially that movie, just it coming out and being as popular as it was, it goes on to affect generations of people and like what they think of when those ideas are brought up. Like, do you ever feel like a sense of serious responsibility with that, or is it more just like the only responsibility is to take the best creative stuff out of here?
Oh, no. I feel it absolutely. I want to feel that also because the way I see our culture, we tend to separate science from art as if they are two different worlds, and they are in a way, but I think there are two facets of the same prism, which is humans have the best skills that we have is our creativity, and we practice this skill with our disciplines, right? And this can be science and it can be science fiction, and there is a dialogue between science and science fiction. They're not separated. It's not that one is more noble than the next one, because it's really like a match. It's like a ping pong match in which we imagine something. The science fiction writer imagines something because it's free to project into the future, and then the audience read those intuitions, and these audience are kids often, and then we metabolize those information, and then those kids become scientists in the future, and then those thoughts become reality. So that's why writers like William Gibson or Philip K. Dick, who predicted our technological evolution, they were just imagining. They weren't even sure what they were doing. It was intuition. But was that intuition really a way to be prophetic? Could they feel the future? Or were they shaping the future by, suggesting something, suggesting a direction to go? It's probably all of those things at once.
Sure, yeah.
But yes, the show business and the movies are maybe the most consumeristic side of our culture, but it's still our culture, and it's part of the human manifestation, and we owe a lot to sci-fi and obviously to science, and I think they are happy together.
I mean, definitely. All the people who are really pushing the limits when it comes to science, all of those people will say that a book or a movie or radio show, so like as a thing they were listening to as a kid, is what made them say, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to do that. It's 100. There is no question if there's a correlation between those two things, for sure.
Yes.
You can always be in the, is it which came first, chicken or the egg kind of thing? Was it the idea, the kind of what you were just saying about, like, were they prophetizing, or were they just coming up with an idea and then people who came after them ran with it, saying, I like that, let's do that?
Yeah. It's a dialogue, and there's a lot of osmosis. The inventor of the mobile phone, or was it the iPad? Well, it's the same thing, isn't it?
No,
notoriously. I mean, the iPad is portrayed perfectly in 2001 Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
And now we have one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a dialogue. It's a beautiful dialogue, and it's very precious. Lately, something that happened to me in recent times, I've been contacted by an association. It's the Italian Association for Alien Research, and I was very, very flattered when they contacted me, because obviously it's something that I'm very interested in. But initially, I didn't want to be part of it because the members of this association are very, they're real scientists. They are airspace engineers and researchers, and I don't know if I would be able to have a conversation with someone like that, because my perception of reality is quite metaphysical compared to but then I found out that the diversity inside a group, it welcomes different points of view, and so I accepted the offer, and now I can have a conversation with those kind of calibers, and that's very precious. That's very precious for me. What I bring in that association is the cinematic point of view, the imaginative point of view, creative, and also the visual effects, special effects, because what we do, we analyze videos and photos of UAP and try to figure out what is it, because obviously a big percentage of that material is just something very easily explainable.
Sure. Yeah.
But we always hope for the anomaly.
Well, unidentified doesn't mean alien, just means unidentified. And, having I've been basically every guest I've had on recently has kind of gotten into a little bit of the point of science is fine, but it can't exist in a bubble. And the people who really laid the foundation for science and math and philosophy said you couldn't do one without the other. The idea of the 7 liberal arts and sciences. You can't be a scientist if you don't understand math. You can't be an artist if you don't understand math. And I think there's at least, until recent scientific discoveries, I feel like for a long time it was viewed as you're either doing this or you're doing that, and there is no overlap. But even in just it's funny. Scientists don't know how to make TikToks. Creative people know how to make TikToks. And they need that, because no one's going to listen to it if they can't present their idea in a way that is palatable for people to listen to. They have to entertain, the creative mind, which again is not necessarily their focus. But that's super interesting, just kind of even getting to be involved in those conversations. I guess of your time being involved in that organization, what's been the weirdest situation you found yourself in, or mind melting situation?
It's probably the one that we are going to explore with you in a little bit, right? I think what I like about it is to bring my experience. I haven't seen anything that looked anomalous enough to say, "Oh, what is this?"
That's it.
So far, I've only seen things that maybe could be something, but if we don't see it moving, if it's a photo of a light, it's very difficult to tell what it is. If it's just a light in the sky who moves in a very strange way, okay, we're seeing something there. Yeah. But if it's just a light, it's not enough. And plus, also, I'm very open-minded. I always hope for something challenging. But then in this group, there's always also a debunker, and the debunker is, oh man, it can be so frustrating. But also,
but you need them.
You need them because it's also part of the credibility of the whole situation.
You have to entertain the opposite side for sure.
Yes, because this way you don't. This way it just makes the whole thing credible. So far, everything was very, I haven't seen anything crazy yet, but I'm hopeful, and I'm very curious to see what's happening soon.
Well, the reason that we have so many options now to sift through, even of videos of possible anomalous or unidentified aircraft, is because everyone has cameras. And that's a pretty recent development. We're talking like 2010. So for the past 10 or 15 years, there's been more cameras recording at all times than ever before. And it's statistically just a matter of time before we start to see more and more of this stuff. Even your experience, I have seen anomalous shit in the sky. I had a very strange experience that I still don't know what to make of it. So when I lived in Tennessee, this is really funny. So I lived in Tennessee, and the guy who lived across the street from me, his name's Zach Mouse, super nice guy, an awesome neighbor. But he was a little eccentric, and he would always be filming the sky. And we lived near army bases, so there were always helicopters coming around and low flying C-130s, like big military planes. And he would always be filming it. And he would start to say, like, I'm capturing orbs. I'm seeing these like metallic orbs. And he would try and show me on the video, but you would only see it if he paused it at like the right second. You'd see like these little orbs. So I don't really think much of this. I'm like, that's pretty wild, but I haven't seen it, so I really couldn't tell you. And one day, I'm out in the front yard painting a bench to go on my porch. And he comes running across the street, and he's like, dude, look up in the sky. And we saw, it was like a small cluster of just blank metallic orbs flying a couple 100 feet above us. It was pretty low. And as we were looking at it, probably 10 or 12 other orbs materialized, just appeared out of nowhere. And they, got over us, they pass over us, and then they disappear. And he and I just look at each other, and we don't say a word because we don't even know what it was. And we just go about our day. And even the type of orbs that we saw, it's a very common sight. I personally don't think what we saw was anything alien. I think what it looked like to me was it looked like some kind of very simple drone that our government could have had. And we lived by many military bases. There were always helicopters and C-130s. Like it wouldn't shock me if that was just some advanced surveillance technology that we had.
And did it have any sound?
Silent. And I've never seen things materialize. So, again, I am just postulating here. That's why I think it's some kind of surveillance technology that it is known now because there's been a lot of technology that's been declassified or developed. We have low-level cloaking technology. And many of those systems consist of an LED wall on the side of the object that's facing your enemy, and on the other side is a camera.
Yep.
So it's not turning you invisible, it's just projecting what's behind the thing on the screen, and it's like the thing isn't there. That's what it felt like to me. It didn't feel like they were buzzing in from another dimension. It felt like there was just, from the specific angle that we saw it, we saw them kind of lose their cloaking ability. And then when they got over us at a certain angle again, they disappeared because the mechanism kicked back in. But it was very strange. It was very bizarre. And it was one of those things where, that moment fucked me up for a long time. And in Tennessee, I also had some very strange experiences. My grandmother has this uncanny ability to just send me books that are hyper relevant to me without any conversation. So when I lived in Tennessee, I would have sleep paralysis. I don't know if you've ever had sleep paralysis, but it's that I used to experience that all the time in Tennessee. And one night I had this very strange experience where I was home alone. I took a shower. I'm sitting there in my underwear, sitting on my bed in my underwear, and I fall asleep. And I have this dream where out of my door, there was a staircase coming from upstairs. And what it felt like was there was like a blurry line, like somebody was moving really fast around me in circles.
Yeah.
But it
like
wasn't
long
just
exposure.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. But it felt like there were multiple things. And it felt like there was somebody or something on the stairs that was saying, everything's cool here. Like, everything's cool. Everything's good. And I wake up, and I had just fallen asleep on my bed for like 2 hours. Lights were still on and everything. That next week, my grandmother mails me a book that is basically about this guy's experience with what he thinks was some kind of abduction scenario. And it was the same experience. I was reading the same experience. She sent me this book completely unprompted. And those things kind of happened, maybe not in the same year, but in like a 1 to 3 year period. And those experiences, again, fucked me up for forever and definitely changed. I got a little more abstract in what I was willing to entertain in the music I created. I got a little more abstract, but also more focused. Because I had this strange experience, it made it more important to me that I take the ideas in my head and express them and maybe make sense of something that doesn't make sense to somebody else. And I'm wondering, from your experience, like, are there any, whether you knew them or not at the time, were there any tangible things about your experience as a kid seeing a UFO that directly reflected itself in your art? And like, at what point did you notice, like, oh, this is why I'm predisposed to make this kind of stuff, because I've been looking at the world this way for so long. Of course, now this is the art that I make, if that makes sense.
I understood that only later. Growing older, then you put the points together and you understand the story of your history. And you say, oh, that's why this, that's why that.
It all makes sense now.
Yes. Yeah. And otherwise, no, I didn't make that connection at first. It was in my heart. Actually, when I went back to school in September, after that event, after that incredible summer that was so open in my mind, I immediately told my schoolmates, I told them what I saw. And very quickly I understood, oh, maybe I shouldn't stay. Because there were...
Yeah, well, some people don't like to hear this stuff, for sure.
Exactly. I was so happy to share. And also because I thought, since I saw one, maybe it's very common. Maybe everyone sees these kind of things. So, but no, it wasn't a good idea. So I've learned to keep it for myself. But obviously, it was in my heart. That didn't change the opinion I had about it. And I know that this is what I still think. So we all kind of believe what we see, right? I believe it when I see it, right? We all think that, as much materialistic or not we want to be, whatever belief system we decide to follow. And so there's also the place that we share all together, right? Which is helped by science, exactly. So science is is what we need to live together in this environment and make things work, and that's what we share. That's very important. So what I do, I separate these two ways of looking at the world. We have what we share together, which is great, and that's what we can talk about because it's accepted. And then we have our personal experience, which can be really bizarre and very tangible and very real. Near-death experiences. There are so many events. The synchronicities that are so well explained by Jung. Those are our personal, important experiences. They are not less real than the one that we share with the other people. And then sometimes we meet other people who had similar personal experiences, and then we can finally talk about it freely without feeling stigmatized,
judged in some way. Yeah,
exactly. But still, the things that we experience in our own personal, intimate, spiritual, whatever you want to call it. We don't have evidence. That's why we can only talk about those with the people that had similar stuff going on. And so yeah, I think it's a little bit like that. I'm happy. I'm fine with that. It's cool.
Sure.
I'm totally patient. If I have to talk about just the material sides of things, and keep the rest for myself, it's all good. But when I was a kid, I suffered a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, me too. Most of my friends did not want to hear about any of this shit. And this was before I had any of my own strange experiences myself. And again, I'm not saying I was communicated with by aliens. I'm not saying I saw aliens, but it was just a many strange experience that I had there that people didn't want to fucking hear about. They were just like, nah, that's a little too out there for me. My next question there would be, do you think people like Dario, Argento, Terry Gilliam, do you think they have experiences like that, or do you think their brain was already looking at the world they didn't need to have strange experiences?
I can't speak for their spiritual life, but no, it doesn't necessarily mean. For example, before meeting Terry Gilliam, I would imagine him as an ex-hippie who did a lot of LSD, with all those visionaries.
Sure, yeah.
But then when I met him, I just met a person who was a great artist with a really prolific, creative mind, who was really not interested in anything like that. And so he didn't need to expand his consciousness
Sure.
in any other way. So yeah, I think creative skills can manifest in so many different ways. They can come from many different directions. That's why we are different when we practice our creativity. For example, I know people that are able to create beautiful artworks and just deliver them as if they were making pizza at home without even looking what they're doing. While when I'm going through my creative process, I suffer. I'm in hell and in heaven, and I have to be alone and telepathically communicate with my cat and all these trips, Otherwise, I can't do anything. So. We're all such a different kind of beasts.
Yeah, it is always funny to me how the creative expression is the common ground, and it doesn't surprise me about Terry Gilliam. There's plenty of very abstract musical artists that I love who I thought the same thing. I was like, man, this person's probably like Frank Zappa's a good example. He's probably eating acid every day, and he's just crazy. He was a very sober individual. He had an quenchable desire to create.
Yes.
And, that I think the most interesting thing about the human experience is getting to view other people's human experience through their lens, through their, what the filters that it passes through in their mind. Mm-hmm. You having been able to work with a lot of people who are, easily the top imaginers in that field, it just must be interesting to kind of see how different at the top level, see how different people witness something and how it passes through their brain and then how it comes back out on the screen or on the set.
Yes. Yeah, there is a lot. Maybe if I have to find the common thing, the common trace, which is a way we create things and when we make a movie, we look at a lot of art, a lot of reference. I remember the first time I had a meeting with Terry Gilliam, the first time I saw his office, his playground was a big desk full of books, full of art, and related to the particular project that he was working on at the time, and all of this is called inspiration, right? So it's I mean, the alchemists, they used to call it spagyria. This alchemist work, right? Spagyria comes from two Greek words. One means I separate, and one means I reunite, reassemble somehow. So spagyria
is this like kind of like dissolve and congeal, solve coagula?
Spao and agerio, if I remember correctly, the Greek words. It means separate and reassemble, and that's what the creative process is. We put together something in combinations that were unusual before. So when we seem to invent something really new, we just create a very new assemblage of things that before no one thought about. So if you can find two different fields, put them together in a very unexpected way, that feels like fresh and new. And that's what every creative person tries to do at its best. And
that's the aspiration, yeah.
Yeah, that's also, going back to the conversation between art and science. That's what Einstein used to say, that creativity, imagination is more important than knowledge, because with imagination we make progress. When with knowledge, we don't move. We need to imagine using knowledge as the ingredients to create new combination of realities. And it's art and science are very, very similar, really. I've been speaking with some very materialistic scientists sometimes, and they were very dismissive about the artists, saying that the artists, they are there with their head in the clouds, which is not true at all, because again, an artist materializes. The amount of concrete action you need to accomplish when you make a movie. Imagine months, years of working on stuff.
Hard
it's
work.
Not just you don't dream. You dream only shortly in the beginning of the process. Then it's only making stuff, and you need to be very tangible and collaborate with a lot of people. And it's not abstract at all. It only is partially,
Well, and I think, again, I understand why a lot of people today, either artists or scientists, would see no overlap. But when we go back to the roots of modern art and modern science, or again, the birthplace of many of these concepts, Greece, the people that were teaching the advanced philosophy, the advanced science at the time, it was a requirement that you also knew drama, that you also entertained. There was no separation. They were all a part of the whole of the human experience. And to negate one is to reduce your ability in the thing that you're trying to focus on. As a mathematician, to negate creative expression is immediately limiting what you're going to be able to do to push the limits of math, even just doing your own thing. So it's definitely been a topic of conversation with just about every guest. I've probably like the past 10 or 15 guests. And I definitely think that's not a coincidence. And again, some people that you meet, they're not going to be good at it, and that's fine. They don't need to be good at it. But what I am happy to see, especially in these types of fields, creative fields, and now kind of the UAP space, is people like, okay, maybe a little bit of what's smart, what's not good about having somebody who does visual effects analyze UFO videos? How is that not smart? These are the people that do it. Regardless of what physics you think are occurring, let's talk to somebody who makes these types of videos and see what they think. There has to be some kind of cross collaboration. Again, it doesn't mean you need to be a scientist. Doesn't mean a scientist needs to start drawing stuff, but being able to kind of come together in the center with your shared interests or shared desire to prove or debunk or whatever,
Yeah. I heard a lot of complaining from modern archaeologists, complaining about the old archaeologists who don't want to collaborate with the engineers and geologists to figure out the things of archaeology. And this being close-minded, obviously, it just, it's not very productive. So I agree. We need to be holistic in every field.
You know, this, I do want to ask one question before we dig into the sound. Was there a specific point where, like, was there a specific movie or part in a creative process where you're like, oh man, that experience I had in the country in Italy, that this is a direct result of that? Was there a moment where you're like, oh, now I see how profound that effect was?
Yes, it's a small example, but it was very big for me, for my formation. When I was in Italy, I used to work in this wonderful special effects workshop. Sergio Stivaletti is the man. He was my teacher, my maestro, and we were making a lot of movies. This was my very beginning of my career. So we were doing all these things. It was very holistic, because when you work in a workshop in Italy of that kind, making special effects for movies, you need to be a little bit like Leonardo da Vinci. You need to be able to draw, to sculpt, to work on mechanisms, to apply the prosthetic makeups, so many levels of so many skills. It's very artisanal, you know. And so this is what I was doing. I was trying to do everything. And then I worked on this wonderful science fiction, actually cyberpunk movie in the early 90s. It's called Nirvana by Gabriele Salvatore. It's a really beautiful cyberpunk film. And so I was
oh my god, this looks fucking awesome, dude.
Yeah. I really suggest you to watch it.
This looks amazing.
That's actually so prophetic, because it talks about virtual reality. It talks about what it means to be human.
Oh wow!
Because
the debate we're having right now. Yeah.
Yes, basically everything that the latest
cool.
Blade Runner was talking about, the whole philosophical dilemma. What is it to be human? Is it our memories? Because there's an avatar in this film that becomes conscious. So anyway, I was drawing these things. So I drew these props and stuff. And then I was giving them to the, production designer, and then we were building the props and whatever it was. Virtual reality helmets, mechanical eyes, all of those cyberpunk things. And then when I went on set, and I was looking in the monitor, and the shot was exactly what I drew a few days before. I didn't know I was drawing a concept art showing the frame. I just wanted to show what it would look like, this guy with a mechanic leg in a particular scene. And then when I saw the frame was my drawing, something very profound happened to me. I understood the power of drawing, the power of visualizing something.
Visualizing, yeah.
How consequential it can be. It can become a frame in the movie that then I will see later in the theater, and the whole world will be able to appreciate. And this gave me that moment showed me my future. I understood what I wanted to become and what subconsciously try to emulate and follow, and it became my job full time. So yeah, that was a magic moment.
It's so cool. Yeah, it really is. It's super powerful when you have those moments where you're like, oh, I didn't realize I was pursuing this, but now I've seen why I am pursuing it, and here's how I'm going to double down.
It happens organically and spontaneously, by surprise. Yeah.
Well, and again, like if you're I have bad experiences where I try to force things in my life. And so it's always so difficult for me to accomplish it. And I find the things that I'm not forcing, the things that I'm just pursuing because I love it, because I'm passionate about it, not having any type of preconceived notion of what it should be. Those are always the things that end up going much farther than just a simple idea in my mind.
And growing older, we learn how to recognize when we behave with our ego, right? And which is useful. To have an ego is a useful instrument that we have in our growing up process. But then at one point, it becomes an obstacle, and we need to learn to be more spontaneous and follow our consciousness and recognize those synchronicity. I think when we're able to recognize the synchronicities and follow that path, that's the way to go. Then we leave the ego behind and find our true self going that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I always joke about it with my friends. Well, they'll reach out to me and they'll be like, "Man, this strange opportunity just arose, and what should I do?" And I'll be like, "It looks like the universe is carving a path for you. You should probably take that." Like there's times in life where you're presented with those things. And if you go with the universal wind that's behind your sails, anything is possible. I've had so many scenarios where I've tried to force things, and it only after a year of me trying to force it becomes obvious that this isn't what I should be doing. Clearly, I'm trying to force too much. That's the ego thing that you're talking about. I want this. I want it this way. And sometimes you don't get that choice, and you have to know when to be like, okay, I've been given this sign, and I'm just going to follow it and see where it goes.
Yes. That's when the ego is useful, when it serves our true nature. It should be the servant. It shouldn't be the boss. Yeah.
Well, that's one thing our society struggles with pretty bad. So. Okay, let's dig into this sound. Let's dig into this thing. I'm super excited to kind of pick this apart. You had sent me this sound. You told me about, wanting to kind of just pick this thing apart from an audio engineer's perspective. And I was super excited to do that. If you could just give the folks a little bit of a backstory of where this sound comes from, and then we'll get into the picking it apart a bit.
Yes, thank you. So now I changed my hat, and I'm here as the vice president of ARIA, the Italian Association for Alien Research. So people submit really cool stuff to us and asks us to analyze them and have opinions. So I'm so happy to submit this to you, because I know your skills as a forensic sound master, and I know that I'm very curious to see what you have to say. So this person, his name is Davide Fiorino, and he's from Liguria. Liguria is the northwest region of Italy, near Genova, and he works as a ham radio operator. He's an official licensed civil defense radio operator. He's been doing this since 2002, I believe. And so this is what he does with his colleagues. Every Sunday, they go on different locations and they communicate with radios. They do it regularly. This has been going on forever. And so this is what they did on February 25, 2024, a few months ago. And something strange happened. All the radio devices started to function less than they should. He says it was as if our devices were under a bell, under a glass bell. Something wasn't working. And this was experienced by 5 people in total, I believe, in a range of maybe 100 kilometers. and it was very anomalous. So they exchanged their experience. They have a Telegram channel which they used to communicate, and so this was very interesting for them. They couldn't explain it. The stranger thing is that soon later, maybe the same day, Davide found some news from ANSA, which ANSA is like Reuters in Italy. It's the news agency, explaining how exactly in that region, exactly on that mountain, and all of that area surrounding that region, there's been a huge UFO sighting. At least 10 people have seen in different, from different points of view, have seen these UAPs in the air, these lights. And so what we are talking about, the sound that you are going to analyze, is a correlation between the experience of these ham radio operators and the fact that at the same moment, in the same location, there's been a huge UFO sighting.
That was perfect. Thank you for summing that up. I would have butchered that. I was trying to, I read the summary, but the translation wasn't spot on. And I was like, I'm so happy that you're able to explain that as concisely as you did. All right. So let's pick, I've got this brought into Pro Tools. We're going to pick it apart. Now, again, my background is audio engineering. I have a degree in audio engineering. I have minimal training in specifically forensic audio. I hold no certifications. I hold certifications in forensic video analysis, and not even analysis. It's like I'm a forensic video technician. But I've worked with audio enough to kind of pick this apart in a reasonable way. And the big thing that I took away from it the first time I heard it, which we'll get to, it doesn't even matter what we find as we analyze this thing. And just for full disclosure, I have not analyzed this. I've just listened to it. So for the sake of everyone who's listening to this right now, I want to play this. It's a 30-second clip. And just, I'm going to turn it down a little bit so it doesn't rupture people's eardrums. But then we'll start picking it apart. So here it is.
Rumore generato dall'apparato che questa volta ti ha sovrastato, sei sparito.
Do it again.
Bene, chiudi un pochettino se c'è ancora il... Rumore generato dall'apparato che questa volta ti ha sovrastato, sei sparito.
Okay, so the first thing that we're always going to do whenever we're picking anything like this apart is listen to it. We're going to listen to it and we're going to see what we can think about just of what we're hearing. Now, I think it sounds like somebody with a phone or an audio recorder is recording somebody's radio. This isn't like a line that's plugged into a radio that's recording the direct audio out. It's somebody who's videotaping somebody holding their walkie-talkie. I don't know that. That's just what it sounds like. There's a little bit of phase stuff which would occur if like the microphone that's recording the walkie-talkie were to move around the walkie-talkie. You kind of hear it. Oh, kind of get to the area. And I think this came from a video, right? You sent me the video too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that does make sense. That does why we get the very minimal phase stuff that's going on again, because there's somebody who's with this walkie-talkie and the sound is coming through the walkie-talkie, but they're not recording the audio off the walkie-talkie. They're taking a video of this person holding their walkie-talkie.
Correct.
So That's just so that we understand why we get that little bit of phase stuff that's occurring. The next thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to pull up a very simple EQ. These are Fab Filter EQs. Oh shit, are you going to be able to see that is the question. Hang on a second. Yeah, we'll just do entire screen. Okay, there we go. So this is an EQ, and what you're seeing here is frequency. Yeah. This is the audible portion of sound, what humans can hear, and that's roughly estimated at about 20 hertz on the low end and 20,000 hertz on the top end. But very few people have unaffected hearing up to 20,000. Most people's is like 17 to, and once you get really below 20, you don't hear that, you perceive it. Those are sub frequencies, so it's less that you'd hear it and more that you would feel it in your body, like the kick of a bass drum or the thump of a bass guitar. It's irrelevant, but here we'll play this again. Okay, so this also looks pretty normal. A phone or small portable handheld recording device isn't necessarily going to have full spectrum capability. It's not capturing 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. It's going to be limited. On top of that, it's recording a walkie-talkie, which is absolutely limited. That's why we're seeing, oh shit. The reason that the primary stacking of frequencies is right here is probably because this is what the walkie-talkie reproduces from 200 hertz to 5K, 4K, and that is really going to be a limitation of literally the speaker size on the walkie-talkie. You can only get so resolute when the speaker is, the size of a quarter. This activity down here is almost certainly wind. You can kind of hear it and you'll see it move. Again, this is somebody videotaping somebody holding their walkie-talkie. So there's wind that's coming across, and we'll see that and then filter it out later. That thump, that's wind, right? Yeah. And this would be standard. If I was processing audio from a set or anything recorded outside, we're going to have to remove this. This is just rumble. It's wind rumble, wind coming across the diaphragm. So I'm just going to drop a very simple filter here. Let me make this much more extreme so we have a little more control over it. And I want to hear what this. Yeah, that's nothing. Yeah, okay, so this all makes sense. The only reason I'm doing this is you just kind of hear what is going on throughout the whole of the recording, and I'm just going to double down again that this is the only usable information. Is stuff occurring between it's actually 3,000 hertz and 250 hertz. So what I've done here is I've filtered out excess information, and we'll just listen to it again to hear that those sounds isolated. Okay, so that all tracks. Now, I will say this. I've used walkie-talkies. I've worked in the event industry. I have had a walkie-talkie on my shoulder for a very long period of time. And there are some elements of this that could just be simple radio interference or feedback. That's when I hear that as somebody who has used long-range walkie-talkies, that is a sound that I would be familiar with some kind of interference or feedback. Now, I've never heard anything that modulates the way that it does, but we would just, again, in order to entertain both sides here, there is this could be simply explained as some kind of simple radio interference or feedback. But where this gets weird, Daniele, is the first time I heard this sound, it reminded me of another sound that I heard. I don't know if you're familiar at all with an individual named Billy Meier. No. Billy Meier is kind of a mythical person in the UFO space. He's from Germany, Switzerland area, but he's a longtime UFO contactee.
In the Alps?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I will also say, just in UFO lore, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, hotbeds for UFO activity. There's even a bunch of rumblings about the Vatican acquiring UFO technology as early as the 30s, but possibly there's a whole thread to suggest that maybe all of the religions of that time were just to kind of give these strange things that were occurring some kind of explanation that the common person could accept and sleep at night. So is it strange that they're having this kind of experience there? Not at all, because a lot of these experiences occur there. And that whole area of Europe is just, there's a lot of this type of activity and experiences.
That's where I saw mine as well. It was on the Alps.
Oh, really? Okay. So that's pretty crazy. Anyway, so Billy Meier is a person who a long time ago, had pictures of these craft. He said he was contacted as a kid and he'd had these ongoing communication with aliens. That all, I don't know about any of that. Only he would be able to tell you about his experiences there. But there's a documentary that was made about him called The Silent Revolution of Truth. This is Billy Meier. Billy Meier is unique because he had these pictures that some people say have been debunked, and as a special effects person, we can pull up some of those pictures and you'll see why people could say that, because the special effects aren't very special. But he is unique because he has all sorts of media associated with aliens or UFOs. And one of the things that he has that is featured in this documentary, which at the time at which they recorded the audio, this was like 70s, 80s. And even at the point where this documentary is newer, but the video that I'm about to show you is pre-existing documentary footage from other stuff that Billy Meier did. And their audio engineer will explain why this is relevant. But it's important to note that when he recorded this, and he'll say it in the video, when he recorded this audio, there were no synthesizers on the market that could do this kind of thing, because that's new. In the 80s, even up to the very end of the 80s, we didn't have the kind of technology that could create these sounds easily, and definitely not this old guy out in the middle of the woods in Switzerland. So we're just going to play this. Now, I'm no expert on alien sounds, but that sounds pretty similar.
Oh, yes.
So the reason that that's important is, again, because Billy Meier's operating from the same area geographically of the globe. Mm-hmm. And when he recorded that sound, it would have been at a time where there wasn't technology to create audio and noises the way that there is now. That would have been very hard for him to have faked at that time. And though there are some similarities between radio interference or feedback, that's when I'm saying that, it's because those are the only other sounds that I've heard on walkie-talkies that even come close to that. But the connection between Billy Meier's audio and this audio, I think, is definitely worth noting. Now, maybe the guys in Italy will have an easy way to go, communicate with Billy or get a hold of those recordings. I don't even know if it's necessary, but that fucked me up. When I heard that, before I did any looking into it, when I heard that, it immediately made me think of that Billy Meier sound. And that's the only time I've ever heard a sound like that. So correlation isn't necessarily causation, but that's pretty interesting.
More correlations.
It's pretty interesting because of all the hyper-specific overlap. And again, at the time that documentary was made, you would be a better knowledge base on that, but special effects were limited. And from the audio perspective, they were even more limited. Mm-hmm. Like that really didn't get super flexible until a little bit later, when they started digitizing audio. But
impressive, man. Very impressive.
It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. And I absolutely got goosebumps when I heard that, because again, this is it's usually with feedback. And for those of you who don't know what feedback is, a feedback loop would be like if you had two walkie-talkies next to each other and you pressed talk on one, but were hearing it out of the other one. What would happen is you would speak into the one that you're pressing down the button. The sound would come out of the other one you're holding and then go back into the microphone of the first. And what happens is that sound, it sounds similar to that, but it's more of a high-pitched squeal. It just really fast. It goes from coherent audio to just a really high-pitched squeal. Many people, if you've been to a live concert and the lead singer drops a microphone in front of the monitor, that's feedback.
Yeah.
And on walkie-talkies, it's a little bit different than a standard audio scenario, but that's the closest thing I could think. And radio interference, we should probably talk to somebody who's, the person who recorded this is an operator of these types of radios. And if it didn't sound like standard interference to him, then my opinion should mean even less when it comes to that.
Yeah. The guy was very surprised, and so even without the correlation of the UFO sighting, they couldn't explain it, and they never heard anything like that before. So thank you for this finding. This is really impressive. I can't wait to tell the guys.
No, really. And this, again, I'm not validating Billy Meier's story. I'm not saying that, you need to go out and believe everything that Billy Meier says. But what I am saying is that that's the only other time I've been listening to sounds my whole life. I've been analyzing audio my whole life. And that's the only other time I've heard a sound like that. And the fact that it has to do with an audio recording of a supposed alien craft, I don't know. There's this thing that I've been really trying to explain to people a lot more, and it's I know this from audio. So let me just pull up this so that we can see it again here. I know this from audio. Humans can only really hear from, let's just go ahead and that's the bandwidth that humans can hear. But shit occurs below that and above that. Mm-hmm. In fact, everything that we interact with in the wireless world that we live in is operating on some frequency or bandwidth of wave energy. And we like to think that it's like this invisible force, but if we could see it, we would be swimming in it. It would be as if we were underwater. And Wi-Fi, 5G, electromagnetic radiation from any electronic device. Those are all things that our human body filters out because it's not important to or it's not
evolutionary. We didn't develop that sense.
Right, exactly. It wasn't immediately important to us, so our bodies developed the things that would be more important to us. Like even for sound, there's this particular, there's this particular portion of the frequency spectrum called the presence range that exists from approximately, really it's like 1.5 to maybe a little over 5. And we hear sounds, we perceive sounds in this bandwidth louder than anywhere else because the actual size of those sound waves are the perfect size for our ear. Mm-hmm. Our ear captures those sounds better because it's designed to capture those sounds. Mm-hmm. Evolutionary, it was important that we heard these sounds more detailed than the rest of the spectrum. But humans respond to sounds that we don't hear. In the same way, like, you know, when a dog will hear a storm coming or a cat will hear a storm coming, it's because they can hear subsonic frequencies.
Or earthquakes, right? Yeah.
Right, precisely. That they're just hearing subsonic frequencies that we can't hear as well or as immediately because our hearing isn't tuned to capture those sounds. And there's a physiological response that occurs when we hear subsonic sounds that's danger. Mm-hmm. The only time humans know subsonic, loud subsonic sounds are explosions, earthquakes, danger. Mm-hmm. Right? So our bodies, our eyes, our ears, they filter out a lot of the shit that's going around us because speaking evolutionarily, it wasn't relevant to us, to our development. But to discount it as if nothing is occurring there would be very silly, very short-sighted. So definitely when it comes to analyzing invisible waves, this is something was creating that. Something tangible was creating that. We might not be able to see it, but something was creating that. Mm-hmm. The speaker, the walkie-talkie, that's just how we're measuring, or that's the specific antenna that we've developed to interact with that space. Yeah. So again, this is just like a explanation of the general ideas of wave energy, but we're constantly surrounded by this stuff, and we like to think that because we can't physically see it, it's not real. But I think any person would accept that their fucking phone is real. Their cell phone service is very real. They base their entire life off of wireless signals. It's very real. It's how we power a lot of our society now. It's through technology that we can't physically see or have a direct interaction with.
Absolutely.
We develop antennas, you know.
And also we ourselves, we have magnetic fields and radio.
Yeah, absolutely.
And electric.
And we are affected by disturbances in those, you know, in those areas.
Thank you.
It's just worth noting. It's just worth noting.
Yeah. Now I understand a little bit more about this mysterious sound. Thanks a lot. And also, your input helps us understanding how, yes, this is it's an anomaly. I mean, what we want to is to find an anomaly, because that's something that needs to be figured out. Otherwise, it wouldn't be interesting. Avilov said that scientists should welcome anomalies, because that's where we need to investigate, because one of the duty of a scientist is to be curious about what's still mysterious, right? Instead of ignoring it because we don't know about it, we should welcome it. So your analysis helps us really making it, identifying it a little bit more. Yes, it is an anomaly.
Well, and it's if it was one time, if it was one thing, it's difficult to really get any type of to glean anything from it. Knowing that there is at least one other recording that exists that is specifically stated that this recording is in relation to anomalous craft or anomalous experiences, that to me is absolutely worth analyzing. If that was just if Billy Meier had just recorded some other sound that sounded like that, it'd be irrelevant. The fact that Billy Meier says he recorded an alien ship and that sound sounds exactly like the sound that this guy captures on his radio, it's at least worth experimenting. And again, for the guys who are actually still in Italy, Billy Meier is a real person, and I'm pretty sure he's still alive. And he has this it's like a hippie community called the Hinterschmidruti, but he's got a backlog of these types of recordings and photos. If this is something that they'd want to pick apart a little bit more, he's a repository with a lot of this stuff. Again, pictures, video, and audio. So it's just, again, another one of those things where it's like, when you have two anomalous scenarios that are loosely focused around the same thing, I think the most fun part about it to me is that you don't know who Billy Meier is. I love that you don't know.
I have seen his images. I have seen the photos that he took about these flying saucers in the Alps, and I've been very curious about it. And actually, the reason why I've learned about it is because of my experience, which was in 1980, happened at the same time when he was on the Alps. Taking those photos and doing his research. So a friend told me, you should check out this guy because he was at the same time in the same place and saw a lot of UFOs. So that's how I came across. And now this is an incredibly interesting surprise. Thank you, James.
Well, and this, like, that area of the globe, he's not the only one. There are incredible accounts of, like Billy Meier's all throughout history in that specific area of the globe. It's not to say it's more than elsewhere, but like if you were to look into these types of experiences, there's a ton of them that specifically occur around the Alps.
Yes,
and Italy and Germany, and that is also worth noting. It's not like this is the only time anyone's experienced anything strange there. That's this deep, rich history of those type of experiences in that area, which to me makes it even more worth looking into. If he had just recorded that audio, it'd be one thing. The unrelated people saying they saw stuff in the sky. Now we're talking, we're stacking stuff up. People who are not connected are saying the same thing. Then we have to at least entertain. Maybe it's not this very simple explanation. Maybe it is something more complex because we've got multiple people. That guy is a licensed radio operator. He's not a fucking joker.
Yeah.
He seriously does this. Yeah. He seriously operates radio. I think it's for ambulances too. Like he's a professional radio operator.
Yeah, it's part of the civil defense. So completely
it's
official.
Not a joke.
Yeah, and
it's
also
not a joke.
He said that before this moment he couldn't care less about UFO sightings, but now he's very curious.
Even better. Yeah, even better. Those are the kind of people whose experiences I tend to believe a little more. Yeah. Is people who want nothing to do with it, who have no interest in it, and then after an experience, they have to at least entertain. I don't know. It's interesting. I'll be interested to hear what the folks think when they listen to that.
Oh,
but
yes.
I'll email you this link to that video so you can check it out, and I'll include the timestamp. But well, this was super wild. Daniele, thank you so much for coming on here. This was super cool. Definitely had a ton of mind-melting moments just kind of hearing more details about your story, but definitely getting to listen to this sound. Is there any other things that you want to tell people about the importance of creativity? Anything you want to leave the listeners with before we head out of here?
Well, I will stick to Einstein. Is a good voice enough to say, yes, imagination is more important than knowledge, but let's use them both, I would say.
Yeah, 100%. We need that right now.
Thank you, James. This was wonderful collaboration, actually.
Oh, I agree. And thank you again for coming on here and just tolerating my stuffy nose and sniffles.
Get better. Take care.
Oh, I will for sure. I'm going to play this outro, but stay on. We'll talk for a bit after.
Yes.
Everyone, this has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Please like and subscribe, share, check us out on Patreon for XLBs, the additional time at the end of some episodes. And we'll catch you on the next one. See you later.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. The End. With your host, James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva. Literally no one cares. Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva. When will this end? Thank you for listening. Now get back to work. Move it along, buddy.